Welcome to the Modern CPA Success Show, where we're 100% focused on helping accounting firms achieve success. If you're an accounting firm owner who wants to learn how to grow your firm by providing virtual CFO services, then this podcast is for you.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's podcast. Really excited about today's show. We have one of our newer employees here to talk to us about the Great Resignation, as Jody is calling her. Maybe Jody didn't coin that phrase, but it's something that's kind of going around. And I think a lot of companies are seeing it, seeing that a lot of people with COVID, for whatever reason, during the pandemic have saw that, people are leaving companies and it's a little harder to find companies. And so we wanted to bring Josh on, who is new to our HR team, and really talk about this and what you can do as a company to keep employees as well as hire employees. So welcome to the show, Josh.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
So, Jody, you want to dive a little bit into that Great Resignation term that you've heard out there, and where you heard that from, and kind of what people are talking about?
Yeah, I wish I coined that term, but no, that definitely didn't coin that term for sure. But we're seeing it all across all different disciplines, all different types of employment. And what we're finding is that people are quitting, and that really started from probably, I'd say, January, and it's still continuing on through today, where they're quitting for all kinds of reasons. And all the reasons are good, but they're just different. We're not used to, as employees, our employers having this happen. People are quitting for lower stress jobs, higher pay, you name it. Want to work from home versus working from a brick and mortar office, or just don't want to work at all. So it's happening, like I said, all across. Unfortunately, we're victim of it as well. Typically we would see in any year having about a 16% turnover ratio, which in the accounting industry is right at the norm. And so far this year, we're seeing closer to 29 to 30% overall ratio, and it's hit harder in different departments than others. So it's kind of all over the board with that. And I see that also at the creative agency, where people are getting snagged up by ridiculous offers from other agencies. Whether it's a Google or something like that, grabbing somebody for $50,000 to $100,000 more than what maybe you're paying for them. And it's that drastic. It seems like that we're seeing across the board. And so that's kind of that's what we're seeing with this, what we call this Great Resignation, is happening. And it's kind of interesting how we as owners of companies have to kind of combat that. And one of the biggest things we've done, Jamie obviously is working closely with all of our team members. And we're going to kind of talk about it from our perspective, so that you can kind of give it, and keep in mind, our perspective is going to be very similar to really the audience's perspective, because we're a service-based company, obviously. And so any creative agency out there, or any other kind of service-based company, is going to have the same type of kind of information and background there. But one of the biggest things we did is we brought in Josh. So we've already had a Zach. Zach is our basically at Josh's position, who meets with our leadership team. And then we thought, what, we need to actually do more for our team than that. So we brought Josh in to really kind of meet with the rest of the team and be that kind of counselor for our team members. And so, Josh, can you I kind of gave you the broad stroke there, but can you kind of fill in really what your position is, and how your position is such a valuable add-on to our team?
Yeah, absolutely. You're totally right about, the Great Resignation, I think, has been coined because, so August was our third month with over 10 million job vacancies in the US, third month in a row. So I've been thinking about it. My parents have been in real estate for like 25 years. And I've been thinking about it similarly to the housing market, where it's such a seller's market right now because the supply is so short of homes. And in the job market, it is such an employee market right now. There's such short supply of talent when compared to vacancies at different companies, everywhere from fast food to Google's. I saw an article today that Amazon's trying to hire 55,000 people before the end of the year. So they're just trying to gobble up as many employees as possible, and it's a really competitive environment. So my role really exists, and I kind of tell people this as I'm doing phone screens, and I've got my hand in a lot of different buckets with recruiting and onboarding and making sure people feel like they've been seen and they have somebody to come to. And really, I'm trying to make sure people have an excellent experience when they work at Summit. It's not. I think we're entering into a time where maybe in like the early 2000s we started getting free beer and like beanbag chairs in offices,
Yeah.
and we're kind of coming to a time, I think, especially with the last 18 months and how people have kind of taken a step back and reflected and thought about their priorities and where their best contribution is with how the world has shifted so much. I think we're also entering into a time where people, they bring different needs to work than they used to, or they're really hoping to get something uh, fuller or deeper from their work experience. And something that I really care about in our firm and in our environment is that people feel like, I show up to work and I bring my best and I contribute and I help, move the goal along, but I'm also seen at work, and people know me, and people would notice if I'm not around, not just because my contribution's not there, but because they've come to know me as a person and they care about me. And so much of those uh, maybe historically undervalued connections and soft skills, I think, are moving to the forefront for people, especially in such an employee market. Like we talked about, a lot of people have the pick of the litter in their job prospects, and that's not true for everybody, but people have the ability right now to be a little more stringent in what they're looking for. And you know they may be comparing to different job offers where it looks like the compensation is really comparable, and they're really digging into what is the culture here, because maybe I just came from a place of employment that was really toxic, or it was, had a really unhealthy response to the pandemic, or XYZ, all these reasons people leave. I think they're starting to really take a step back and refocus and figure out what is it exactly that I'm looking for. And
are you interested in offering virtual CFO services at your firm or scaling your existing service offerings? The Virtual CFO Playbook, How to Land $60,000 a Year Clients and Provide a Killer Client Experience, is an online series of modules that will equip you with essential tools for creating and delivering scalable VCFO services. These approaches have helped Summit CPA grow from $500,000 to upwards of $5 million in revenue over the past decade. If you're ready to grow your firm, visit summitcpa.net/VCFO Playbook to enroll now.
And I want to help make sure Summit is a place where they can get that.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing I've seen during these 9 months, and even longer, to be honest, is, I'm because I'm an accountant, I'm a data guy, right? So I like to, when people leave, I really like to talk to them and say, okay, let's try to get a list of why they left and what we can do. And, I'd say in the past, we were able to get some pretty good information about the people leaving and be able to make changes and move forward or move in a different direction of, okay, this one thing we're doing is the reason that 2 or 3 people left, or maybe it's one specific client or whatever that is. We were able to get that data in the past. And I'd say with the last probably 6 or 7 people we left, it's just all for different reasons, which makes it really hard for someone that's so data driven. It's like, man, it's like it's really hard to put your finger on why people are leaving and why people are moving. And sometimes it's compensation, like Jody said, they're getting these great offers from somewhere else. Sometimes it's, I just want to be home. I just want to stay home with my kids now. Or it's another thing of, it's just I'm not wanting to do this type of work anymore. I want to go to a completely different career. So we've seen everything over these past 9 to probably even a little further than that. And so I think that's the hardest part for me. So Josh, do you want to talk a little bit about, what are the things we can do, and what are the areas we can go down to try to keep people when the reasons for them leaving are so vast and so different?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And it kind of leads to the point where you've got to individualize some of your knowledge and understanding of your staff and your people. And we're getting into a point where you're right. It's not like, 90% of our people are just going for a higher salary, or this large, portion of people really want to work in a physical office space. That's pretty rare nowadays, honestly. But because this is, I have like a scatter plot in my mind that's just a terrible data set that's not got any best fit line, because of that, we really have to get in front of these issues. And, part of the reason I'm excited to be a part of the team here is because I'm one extra touch point with people that the hope is the familiarity and the trust that I can build with our team will let them bring up smaller things faster and bring up concerns that they might have kept themselves and they might have just sat on quietly. And, I think what we see a lot and kind of what's led to the Great Resignation is that a lot of times people aren't really voicing the issues they're having. They're just quietly looking for other jobs and disappearing. And we really want to get out ahead of that and figure out, why is it that this person is disinterested? If we had a little more face-to-face time with them, would somebody have noticed that sooner, been able to kind of dig into that and figure out, oh, it looks like you do just have too much on your plate. So let's see how we can resource you and delegate some of that out. Or, oh man, we realize you're just not connecting personally with any single person on your team. Well, does that mean we move you to another group or another part of our team here where you maybe have some more natural connection, so it doesn't feel so alien for you to be working with these people that you don't naturally jive with? And that's neither here nor there. Everybody's going to have different personalities, and hopefully everybody has a charitable disposition and is kind and professional with one another. But I think if we're honest with ourselves, we all have people we've really enjoyed working with in the past, and we all have people we've really not enjoyed working with. And that doesn't necessarily mean they're a bad person or even a bad teammate. It might just mean you don't connect. And hopefully, if we can get in front of that and sense some of that before it comes down the line, or before we get a 2-week or a 4-week notice, I'm going for another opportunity, then we can start to mend some of those issues before they arise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's kind of funny. It's not funny, but it's funny. But the people that have been leaving have given us plenty notice. I mean, 4 weeks has been pretty standard, with a few exceptions. That we've had even those that have given us 6 weeks or 6 months in that case. So it goes from a big range. So I think they're leaving on good terms. They always say, oh, we love Summit, but maybe I don't want to work as hard. I want to make more money doing something different. Which how are you going to combat that? Someone doesn't work as hard to make more money. That's kind of tough for a business owner. Or someone gets in and basically doesn't even show up for the first day. We've had that happen how many times now? Probably 3 or 4 times.
Three times.
Yeah, just in the last few months. I mean, where we're ready to go. We've told the other candidates, hey, we've got this position and filled up already, and then all of a sudden they don't show up, and now you're back at the drawing board. How do you prevent stuff like that, or is that something that's really kind of been the case? I've heard a lot. I've talked to a lot of business owners, and they're having the same issue with the no showing first day, exact same issue. So I know it's not a Summit issue. How do we find those candidates? How do we weed those candidates out, or is there any way of doing that, or should we overhire to compensate and assume that someone's going to leave, based on the current state of the economy, state of the industry type thing?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. It is. I was talking to my wife about this, and she was like, it is just baffling to me that somebody would go through all of that time to do multiple rounds of interviews and assessments, accept an offer, and then not show up. So, we were kind of laughing before the end of this. I bought coffee and donuts for somebody on their first day, and they ended up not showing up.
Today,
so
right?
it was today. So at just after 8 a.m., some half dozen donuts and a nice coffee from like a cool spot near his house showed up, and then he didn't. So I hope he enjoyed the donuts.
That's the reason. One of those donuts.
Yeah, he cashed in. So I think a lot of the reason that happens, there's multiple reasons here. One, particularly in the adjustment to a remote environment for people who came from companies that weren't remote. If they didn't already have the trust established and the relationship established to, if their manager doesn't trust them to do the work, so they're kind of being micromanaged from a distance and they're feeling that pressure. Honestly, a lot of people are working from home and they're not worried about their boss seeing them scroll through LinkedIn for new jobs. So they're just passively scrolling, wondering, is a new opportunity going to be better? They're kind of looking out their window, daydreaming, maybe if I just did something different, I would be happier or more content or XYZ. So you've got people who are they're just casting their net wide and seeing what comes back in. So it's always, like I said, really interesting to me that people would spend a lot of valuable time going through multiple interviews and doing assessments and things like that. But I think a lot of people are just really curious what's out there. And because there's so many vacancies out there right now, people are not feeling the pressure of making a move, but rather they're just wondering, could there be something better? So I'm just going to keep slowly trickling out. I'll keep my resume updated and keep sending it out over and over. And I find that a lot of folks are in a more passive stance when they're pursuing new roles than historically they have been. There's usually been a little more hunger or a little more fight when people are trying to earn a position. And, I can see that really easily in the first interview, because I know in a heartbeat, if you actually know who we are and what we do and why you'd be a fit, or if you just clicked, easy apply on Indeed or LinkedIn somewhere, and you had to Google really quick, what does this company even do before we got on the phone? And some of preventing that is realizing, and it takes about 2 minutes for me to realize that in a phone screen, and to be gracious with that person, finish the phone screen, and then just let them know that they're not going to be a good fit, because I'm not going to waste the resources of the hiring manager for that position, the teammates who would get involved, if a person's not really interested to begin with. If they're just hoping to maybe make an extra 5 or 10 grand, and they're not really looking to leave their position, I know that they're not going to be a culture fit for Summit anyways, because we don't really do the whole passive, just let life happen to me kind of mode. We're really nimble, really active group of people who know what we want, and we're moving towards that, and we're trying to do that as a team. So if somebody comes to me and they're really nonchalant about the opportunity, that tells me pretty quickly that they're not going to be a match.
Yeah,
So there's definitely some tells there, right? I mean, you said nonchalant, they don't know anything about the company. If they're not 100% sure they want to make a switch during that call, those are the triggering points that you look for and say, hey, probably not a good fit at this point. Would that be fair?
Yeah, and that would be fair for sure. And I would say that, I've even started to give a little bit of pushback with some of those people, and sometimes people are nervous, and that just presents in different ways in an interview. Especially there are a lot of people that I'm interviewing that this is the first time they've interviewed on Zoom, and it feels foreign to them, and they're in a 3-piece suit and they're sweating at home on their couch. And usually I can give a little bit of pushback in a couple areas, and how they respond to that is going to tell me, like, oh, you actually are interested, you just are kind of nervous and you're pushing through that now, and I can see that. But if somebody shuts down or just says like, oh yeah, you're right, I can pretty quickly close the book on that candidate, and of course not to be a jerk to their face or anything, and thank them for their time, but I'm going to communicate back with them and let them know, like, hey, this is what I saw, this is why I don't think it's going to be a great fit, but I do wish you the best.
I've definitely changed the way I interview because of this as well. I used to be a big, and at Grant Thornton we talked a lot about behavioral interviews, and I learned the behavioral interview book, and I still am a big fan of behavioral interviews, but I definitely have shifted my interview almost to the point where I leave an uncomfortable amount of time at the end for them to ask questions, right? Like if I'm going to do a 30-minute interview, like I'm going to ask 2 questions. I'm going to ask 2 behavioral questions. And I'm like, all right, ask me questions. And with the amount of information companies have out there nowadays, like if you're really interested in this company, 15 minutes should not even be enough time to ask questions. Like, when you think about us alone, like what are we at, 50 some podcasts now, Jody? And we've done,
Yeah.
you looked at our LinkedIn pages, there's articles every day, there's things we
Tons of
write, there's
articles.
so much information out there that
Mhm.
like, you should know me as well as my wife does when you come into my interview. Like, you know, I'm out there. And so like, if you come into the interview and I leave 15 minutes for questions and you ask me generic, so tell me about a standard day questions, like, okay, then obviously you haven't researched the company. So I lean so much into how much does this person appear to want the job? And you can tell, like, if someone is super excited about Summit and has watched all of our stuff and be like, you know, in podcast number 37, you said this, can you expand on that? Like, those are the type of questions where I'm like, I'll hire you on the spot. You know, you ask those type of questions. I'm giving keys right here, but like, that's the type of stuff that I'm looking for. Is I want you to really be interested in what Summit does in order to hire you, as long as you have the right skill set, of course. But to me, that's the key, because then you're going to stay for a while and you're going to really be passionate about what we're doing.
Yeah, I'll say, you know, I had one day a few weeks ago where I had 3 interviews back to back to back, and had the first one was I'll just say pretty disinterested, was wondering like, could I make some adjustments to the job description? And I was like, you know, but you applied for this, right? And I knew pretty quickly that one wasn't going to pan out. The next interview, she didn't show up, didn't send any communication, anything. And then the third interview that day, we went overtime. She had so many questions. She had read Glassdoor reviews. She'd read multiple blog posts. She'd listened to the podcast. And yeah, I was ready to make an offer right there on the spot. I was like, okay, I probably need to involve, you know, the people you'll be working with and your new manager. But I finished that interview and immediately reached out to the hiring manager and was like, this candidate just came through. You know, normally I would maybe wait until a few more people I've processed in that batch and then send them over. But I was so excited to move her forward. Like, I knew immediately, let's get her going. I want you guys to meet her as soon as possible. Really excited about this candidate because she was excited about us. And she was decisive in knowing, like, I'm excited about this opportunity. It would be a step in the direction where I want to go. And I've done my homework, you know.
Yeah.
And it
Almost
was
like they're
just
interviewing
such a clear
themselves
winner.
a little bit, you know, like it's almost like they're interviewing themselves prior to coming in, because they're like, I know what the job duties are, and this is why I'll meet them, and this is why I know what I'm looking for. And that's, again, that's exactly what you're looking for, is like they understand the job so well because they've done all the research. So it's like, really, I can ask any questions I want, but if you're coming in telling me why you can do this job and you're really excited about it, it's like it's a big difference.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love the conversation. I just want to kind of stop real quick. Originally we were going to talk about, you know, a few different areas of this, but I love the recruiting side so much. You know, Josh, do you mind coming back maybe next on the next podcast? We can kind of get into maybe rewards and retention, you know, employer retention, that sort of thing.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. So I didn't mean to stop. I just want to kind of double check there. But recruiting, you know, with what you're saying, it sounds like there's really an opportunity for the employer to really screen out your candidates a little bit better than maybe what you did in the past. You know, maybe like Jamie was saying, generic questions, you know, maybe aren't cutting anymore. You know, you really want to only bring on those people that are very excited, it sounds like, for the position. And I think those people are the people that are more than likely gonna stay long term. You know, so kind of backing that up. So what would, if you were to rehire the person that we just did, that didn't show up, what would be some tell signs there?
Yeah, so this is hard because this guy's got such an enjoyable personality and is clearly highly skilled. So would have been able to do the job well. Would have, I think, would have had a really high contribution to a team, and has got the experience. Got a really wide breadth of experience to bring to the table. So those were all things that were excited. I would say in hindsight, I'll put this on myself, maybe some other people on, you know, the team that he was going to be going towards. We got excited about all that experience and expertise that he was bringing, and probably didn't dig in enough to the desire to do it, and didn't spend enough time really sitting with and kind of pushing, because he's such an enjoyable guy. You know, he didn't come in nonchalant, like, oh, I've never read your website, I don't know anything about you. He came in, he was studied, he was professional, and really highly competent. And I think some of that might have disarmed me at first. So I didn't try and poke the holes in, do you really want to do this? You know, any job you take is going to have challenges. Are you ready to face those? Do you have the energy and the fight to want to push through and get better and make your teammates better? And I think some of that was lost in personality and in competency. And the reality is somebody could be perfectly competent and they could be a great person to hang out with and grab dinner with or a drink or something. But if they don't want to do the job, they're not going to do the job and they're not going to stay. So ultimately that's what it was. And it's a real bummer to send coffee and donuts to somebody who didn't actually start.
Sure.
But
for sure.
in some ways it's better to know that right now than to
100%.
pour a lot of time and resources into that person for 2, 3, 4 months to where they've just now kind of crested the hill and they're starting to contribute, and then they realize this isn't doing it for me, I've got to go.
Well, the nice thing about that was that person's self-awareness. Although officially it was their start date, they'd been in a few meetings and so forth, and they were kind of seeing exactly how we operated and that sort of thing. And I think their awareness was like, you know what, I don't think this is a good fit. And like you said, I'm glad they did today versus us spending 30 days, 60 days, a year, and then the person decides to leave at that point and was completely unhappy the entire time. And our staff was completely unhappy with them the entire time, and so it was actually a very good thing that it did happen, but kind of a bummer and something that we probably want to catch or try to catch in some manner, going forward.
Yeah.
The hardest part to me about the hiring cycle is the majority of the time, especially when you're talking about someone that's gone between 0 and 90 days, right? Like someone that doesn't last that 0 to 90 days is the majority of the time. I'm not going to throw a percentage out there because it'd be wrong, but it's a majority of the time, whatever that flag is when you're interviewing them, where even if you just said it, okay, these are all the positives and here's the one thing I'm a little worried about, it usually is that thing you're worried about that actually makes them not work out. And so it's you don't want to have just that one thing that you're like, I'm not so sure about that, because I would say with this candidate that's exactly what it was. I think the thing that you and I talked about after interviewing with him, Josh, is exactly why he's not going to work out or why he didn't work out. But again, that happens oftentimes where someone has that little flag and they stay with us for 10 years or 8 years, so oftentimes it does work out. So it's if it's just one little cautious area, do you not end up hiring that person, or how do you handle those little cautious areas? Because we did ask a lot of questions about that as well, as a follow-up, because I know both you and I were pretty concerned about some of those things.
I think the other thing would have probably creeped in there is the fact that, hey, we needed a body right away. Is that person good enough to be there, or is that the person the right person for that position?
Yeah, absolutely. I think something that you have to keep in mind is there's always going to be some inherent bias towards getting a body in the door when you're hiring, because if you're hiring, it means you have a vacancy. So theoretically, there are companies out there who are just hiring a bunch of people and then waiting to get work to give them. And that's not really the nature of what we do. So generally, when you're trying to fill a position, you have a bias towards, you want to get somebody in the door who can do it. So you find somebody, like we said, who's a great personality match, who could do the job. I think it's important to remember, okay, I am bringing some heavy bias towards just giving them an offer. And in hindsight, I don't think we necessarily made a mistake extending that offer. And I am really glad for his self-awareness to know, ultimately this is not going to work out. And sometimes there's going to be, yellow flags or red flags, like you talked about, Jamie, that we really can push into and dig into with somebody. And, you've got to kind of toe the line there, because you don't want to put somebody on their heels and on the defensive, oh, you've seen through me or something like that. But you also don't want to just give people a pass when hey, there's this issue that came up or this area that I'm concerned on. And that is something that's really tough to kind of thread that needle.
Yeah, for sure. So we are actually right at time here. So I know that 30 minutes flew by, but definitely appreciate you coming on. And like Jody said, I know we only touched on one part of the important part of keeping people here. So we are definitely going to bring you back and continue this conversation, because I think that this is something that I would not be surprised if this is our most downloaded podcast right now, because I know a lot of people are thinking about this, because I know Josh, you and I are meeting almost every day talking about this right now, so I know it's the top of my mind. So
for sure.
Great. Thanks a lot, Jody. And thanks, Josh.
Yeah,
absolutely.
You.
Enjoy this podcast? Visit our website at summitcpa.net to get more tips and strategies for achieving modern CPA firm success. We're here to be a resource in this ever-changing industry.